The 2024 Pokemon World Championships are only a few weeks away, and trainers all over the globe are testing, analyzing, and getting their Shrouded Fable pre-orders ready using Tablemon's affiliate link in the description of this video to make sure they have their Dusknoirs and Pheasantipities sleeved and ready to go for the most prestigious tournament of the year. At the tournament, with the pinnacle of Pokemon players attending, the differences between top-level competitors are minimal when it comes down to in-game decisions, perfect deck lists, and luck of the draw. A perfectly timed boss, a flawlessly sequenced turn, or an unorthodox knockout can mean the difference between gold and just missing out on the glory.
And Boss's orders brings up the Zacian V, Vance Kelly, the 2023 Pokemon TCG World Champion!
A brand new set at the World Championships always brings out the bangos of Pokemon, as we are all looking to find that hidden gem, that amazing rogue deck that people dismissed or hadn't even thought of yet that will give you even the slightest edge thanks to the surprise factor of the unfamiliarity of the decks. Legendary deck builders such as Ross Gotham or Tord Reklev will be in Honolulu trying their best to become the best Pokemon TCG player and cement their place in history once more. And in order to create something so special for the hardest tournament of the season, it's of the utmost importance to have a very good grasp on all the well-established archetypes and how they work, as well as what their strengths and weaknesses are. In this video, we will take a look at my personal tier list, where I will be analyzing the potential challengers and why I think they have a chance to succeed or not in the Shrouded Fable metagame that begins at the World Championships. Be advised that this list stems from my own testing, knowledge and theory, but feel free to roast me in the comments if you think I've gotten something entirely wrong. Starting off in the C tier, we have the decks that, while they are established archetypes that have good synergy between the cards, I don't think they are real world contenders. Gholdengo EX is the perfect example of that. Its strategy is simple, to get a bunch of energy and then discard them to KO things. But the 50 damage multiplier means you need almost double superior energy retrieval to 1-KO the main Pokemon in top tier decks. The possibility of utilizing different attackers like Origin Form Palkia V-Star and Radiant Greninja means it is not a linear deck overall, and Pheasantipity EX gives it a nice consistency boost as well, but its lower damage output compared to Chien-Pao EX or Raging Bolt EX means it will remain a fringe pick for the die-hard Gholdengo fans only. Next up, we have Origin Form Dialga V-Star. This deck relies on having multiple Metangs set up to power up Dialga V-Star's Metal Blast to do a lot of damage and using Star Chronos to skip an opponent's turn and turn the game in your favor. While Pheasantipity X will help the consistency of the deck and can even attack in a pinch, one-hit KOing the high HP Pokemon dominating the metagame will not be an easy task, and the deck can be a bit unreliable in its setup. Another C tier deck is good old Giratina V-Star. With powerful attacks like Lost Impact and Star Requiem, it's surprising it is ranked so low, but this is explained by the rigidness in the structure of the deck as well as Kyurem coming out. This means the deck can no longer gamble with not playing Manaphy. Nightly Stretcher and Pheasantipity X could potentially help the deck a bit, but between new threats and spreading yourself too thin with other attackers like Iron Leaves EX and Bloodmoon or Saloon EX, in addition to Cramorant Sableye and Radiant Greninja, it seems like the deck is on its last legs. Moving on to a more recent deck, we have Quad Iron Thorns EX. This card's best asset is its amazing initialization ability, shutting down other rulebox Pokemon. And since it's the only Pokemon you play, your opponent will never have a chance to not have to deal with it. Shrouded Fable brings it a new utility supporter, Call Resist Tenacity, to search for legacy energy, which can be crucial for the deck's price map, and Lost City to eliminate some of your opponent's key attackers. However, there's too many good non-rulebox Pokemon, and abilities in the metagame that means the deck has polarizing super good and super bad matchups, and its low damage output means it will struggle to apply enough pressure. Next up, we have Miraidon EX. A fast-paced, consistent deck that utilizes Tandem Unit to easily set up, but then has to rely on the variance of Electric Generator to power up threats throughout the game. The deck gets a very welcome consistency boost with Pheasantipity X for the late game, but with Charizard EX making a full comeback to the very top of the metagame after a short hiatus, as well as two of its best matchups, Gardevoir EX and Lost Box, taking a hit, it's going to be very hard for this deck to see any sort of success despite having a good matchup against other top decks like Regidrago V-Star and Lugia V-Star. The final C tier deck is a throwback to Roaring Moon EX. The deck uses Professor Sada's Vitality and Dark Patch to power up a variety of powerful attackers and plays a few water energy to open up Radiant Greninja as a threat as well. Shrouded Fable brought in a new threat in Petrant EX as a powerful and cheap late game attacker, and a consistency bump with Pheasantipity X and Nightly Stretcher. This deck dominated tournaments right before rotation after legendary deck builder Ross Cawthon piloted the deck to a top 8 finish at Charlotte Regionals with it. Yet it all but disappeared for the Dunsparce version after rotation took place, but with these new inclusions, the deck can be a little more competitive. However, the self-damage from Frenzied Gouging is still a liability, and the Charizard EX matchup is still very difficult.
If you have enjoyed the video so far and found the information useful, please consider becoming a tablemon channel member through the join button down below. For as low as $1.99 a month, you can help support the creation of these videos.
And now, onto the B tier. These decks are powerful and can go toe to toe against every deck pretty much. They look and feel great and are a step above in power to those in the C tier, but have some glaring weaknesses in their own strategy or against the more powerful and popular decks in the higher tiers. The first deck in the B tier is Snorlax. Its block strategy to trap a Pokemon in the active the whole game can be very effective for unprepared decks, and Erika's Invitation combined with accompanying Flute force an opponent to bench Pokemon even when they don't want to. With a Pokemon trapped, you want to play resource denial cards such as Airy or Misfortune Sisters to discard items. Shrouded Fable brings 2 new cards to the deck, Xerozic's Machinations and Nightly Stretcher. Xerozic forces an opponent to discard cards from their hand until they have 3 left, which lets you pressure opponent's resources even more, whilst Nightly Stretcher allows you to recover a KO'd Rotom V or Mimikyu immediately. However, the new set also brings Dusknoir, which is a great card against Snorlax as it forces them to take prizes, disrupting the counter catchers potentially, as well as giving something like Charizard EX the perfect answer to Mimikyu, which used to be a nuisance to deal with. Next up in the B tier is Ancient Box. The strategy for this deck is very simple. Discard a lot of ancient cards to boost Roaring Moon's Vengeance fletching damage output. Shrouded Fable brings Nightly Stretcher to a deck, but nothing else of note. It could play Fezandipity X, but it is not recommended to play a multi-price Pokemon for this deck. This deck is a perfect example of having some really good matchups such as Lugia V-Star or Raging Bolt EX, but some really atrocious in Charizard EX, Regidrago V-Star, and Dragapult EX, as well as a deceptively difficult Gardevoir EX matchup. Despite the deck's high consistency and non-rulebox appeal, it remains in the B tier as the HP of the stage 2 Pokemon EX are very troublesome for it to reach in time. Following Ancient Box is Lost Box. These decks are incredibly adaptable and versatile as they can play a wide array of attackers to cover different decks of the metagame thanks to Mirage Gate, and the Lost Zone engine is fairly consistent with Color's Experiment and Flower Selecting. However, Shrouded Fable brings bad news for the deck, a hard counter. Now please don't interpret this as you should never play Lost Box decks again. Rather, a more detailed analysis of the metagame needs to be done before choosing this deck when heading to a tournament, as if it is doing well, people are more likely to tech in Kyurem and cancel Cologne to help against it. But if it hasn't done well for a period of time, then that is the best time to play it, when people are less likely to tech against it. With Regidrago V-Star very likely to include Kyurem in every list, and random Kyurems popping out of nowhere teched into any possible deck, I believe it will be enough to keep Lost Box in check and in a cyclical presence just like the Drapion V and Mew VMAX dynamic. Another B tier deck is Chien-Pao EX Baxcalibur. Once Baxcalibur's super cold ability is up and running, backed by Pokestop and Bibarel, the deck is very hard to contain. It has Radiant Greninja, Chien-Pao EX and Iron Hands EX as formidable attackers to take on low or high HP Pokemon favorably. Shrouded Fable brings Nightly Stretcher as a more direct recovery card than Super Rod, and Fezandipity X as a powerful companion to Bibarel. Yet the full reliance on Baxcalibur proves to be its biggest weakness, as it will continually be targeted. Another Shrouded Fable card that directly impacts the deck is Dusknoir's Cursed Bomb, which could allow Charizard EX decks, usually a good matchup, to take down a Frigibax and a Baxcalibur in a single turn. This means you're now hard pressured to have a third Frigibax down at all times, and that might prove too much for the deck to handle, not to mention the questionable Dragapult EX matchup as well. This deck is powerful, but it sometimes needs one too many things at once, and its starts can be questionable at times. And finally we have the last B tier deck, Pidgeot Control. This deck is able to use Pidgeot EX to search for resource denial cards such as Airy and Shrouded Fable, but an arguably more powerful disruptive card, Xerozic's Machinations. This card forces your opponent to discard cards from their hand until they have 3 left, which lets you pressure opponent's resources even more to then utilize the right attacker for the situation such as Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, Radiant Charizard, or Pidgeot EX itself, and possibly others to adapt to different threats that opponents may have. These decks thrive on a well-established metagame because they have a clear path on what to counter. However, a new set makes it a bit harder to predict the metagame as well as exacting card inclusions and thus resources available in each game. There's no shortage of options for this deck to adapt and counter any metagame, but the big question is what the metagame will look like at Worlds. We have tournament information from gym battles in Japan, but that doesn't always translate to our side of things. We will also have around 2 weeks worth of online Pokemon TCG live tournaments once the set becomes available, but not many Worlds qualified players playing these though. This is one of the hardest but also most rewarding decks to pilot, and thus it's almost guaranteed to not be played in high numbers, but in the right hands, this deck could have a deep run at the World Championships. And now, we will go over the A tier decks. These decks I could easily see top cutting the World Championships and possibly going all the way. They're consistent, powerful, and can handle anything thrown their way with very few or no really bad matchups. Starting the A tier with Gardevoir EX. Monkey Dory's Adrenabrain ability proved to be such a powerful asset that it propelled the deck to the very top of the previous format. The deck utilizes Careless Refinement for consistency, a variety of powerful attackers in Drifloon, Screamtail, and Fluttermane, and also Monkey Dory to alternate between 1KOs and being a sort of spread deck. Unfortunately for the deck, Shrouded Fable brings only Nightly Stretcher to help it have more immediate recovery of an attacker or Gardevoir EX, but it also adds Dusknoir to Charizard EX and Dragapult EX decks, making those matchups a lot harder as it lets them target more than one Pokemon at once. As well as Fezandipity X, which, if you've been paying attention, can be played in almost every deck at this point. All of this, along with Regidrago V-Star's inclusion of Kyurem, alongside the threat of Dragapult DX and Hawlucha early snipes, means the deck now has a lot more threats to deal with. Despite all of this though, the deck is very strong, and can hold its own against everything, even if some normally favorable matchups now got way more difficult due to the new cards, and that's why in my eyes it's an A tier deck. Next up is Dragapult DX. Phantom Dive is a very threatening attack, especially against other evolving decks. There's a lot of discourse surrounding this card and which partner is the best, as NEAC didn't really provide a definitive answer. However, Shrouded Fable seems like it will streamline the deck and make Pidgeot EX the best partner alongside Dusknoir and Fezandipity EX. Combining Phantom Dive with Dusclops and Dusknoir's Curse Bomb ability feels like a dream come true for this deck, with the damage counters building up on the bench, and Curse Bomb allowing Phantom Dive to reach for higher numbers such as a perfect KO and a Charizard EX. All of this will definitely help in making a Dragapult DX a more potent threat, with Neo Upper Energy and Mela fixing any energy issues the deck might have, 320 HP combined with no weakness, and the Recon Directive ability helping out the consistency. Dragapult DX might finally be having its time in the spotlight come Worlds in a few weeks. Moving on to Lugia V-Star. This deck needs to overcome the Archeops hurdle of getting them in the discard fast enough to keep up with an opponent, but if it does, it feels like the best and most versatile deck. It has Cinccino, Iron Hands EX, and Wellspring Ogre Pony EX, all buffed by Legacy Energy. Shrouded Fable doesn't really bring anything to this deck. An argument could be made for Fezandipity X, but the bench management is always very delicate for Lugia V-Star, and smart use of Gift Energy can definitely compensate for it. Regardless of no direct upgrades though, Cinccino lets the deck trade quite well against Regidrago V-Star, Dragapult EX, Charizard EX, and Raging Bolt EX, whilst Iron Hands EX handles Gardevoir EX, and the pair does work against anything in the lower tiers. This combination of factors lets Lugia V-Star stand tall as a tier A contender that is really well poised to have a deep run at Worlds as long as you can consistently discard those pesky Archeops. The final A tier deck is Raging Bolt EX, a very fast and straightforward deck that just wants to use Professor Sal's Vitality and 1KO something significant, ideally a multiple price Pokemon every single turn. Despite running 3 different basic energy types, the synergy between Raging Bolt EX and Teal Mask Ogre Pony EX makes it a top tier deck. Shrouded Fable adds Fezandipity X for extra protection against Unfirst Stamp and Iono, which run rampant in the format and are the only things in its way of using Professor Sal's Vitality every turn possible. The deck has a very good matchup against other big 6 decks such as Regidrago V-Star, Lugia V-Star, and Dragapult EX, and can go toe to toe against Charizard EX thanks to the weakness advantage of Teal Mask Ogre Pony EX and the multiple gusting effects to pressure since the very first turn. Its worst matchups tend to be Gardevoir EX due to Drifloon, and Ancient Box due to the eventual 2-for-1 price trades. However, Raging Bolt EX's simplicity could be its best tool for success, and its low skill image will be put to the test at the World Championships. And thus, we arrive at the S tier, which includes the 2 decks that I personally feel the strongest and have tested the best so far heading into Worlds. They're fast, adaptable, consistent, and quite simply powerful. The first S-tier deck is Charizard EX. This deck relies on Pidgeot's to help support it throughout the game, and its attack Burning Darkness gets more and more powerful as the game advances. Shrouded Fable brings it Dusclops and Dusknoir for the offensive power, and Fizandipity X for consistency and disruption protection. Sacrificing a prize card for Curse Bomb isn't so bad when you consider the payoff. It adds a 30 damage to Charizard EX's attack for the prize you gave away, and the 5 or 13 damage counters can be used to either increase your attack on the opponent's active Pokemon further, or to target down and snipe a benched Pokemon while still dishing out heavy damage to the active. I expect the standard to be a 2-1-1 evolution line of Dusclops and Dusknoir, which makes it more reliable and also allows you to even do a double Curse Bomb turn if the situation merits it, but it is a high risk, high reward gamble. Fizandipity X helps sustain the triple stage 2 deck, and these extra resources from Take Advantage go really well with Pidgeot EX's Quick Search when you need various cards for a specific play. These new Shrouded Fable cards will make this deck possibly the most widely played, and with good reason, by the world's best at the World Championships. The other deck in S tier is Regidrago V-Star. The attack Apex Dragon lets it take advantage of all the powerful Dragon type cards available, such as Dragapult EX and Hisuian Kudra V-Star. But Shrouded Fable brings two key cards to help the deck further, Kyurem and Fizandipity X. What makes Kyurem so good is the Triforce attack, which allows it to take out multiple low HP Pokemon against decks that like setting up, such as Charizard EX, Dragapult EX, or Gardevoir EX. This will give Regidrago V-Star a new threat level that it didn't have before, and it only needs to include Canceling Cologne to ensure Manaphy doesn't get in the way of it. The other addition of Fizandipity X makes the deck less prone to disruption by Unforced Stamp or Iono, allowing you to more easily find key pieces each turn to adapt to any situation you're up against. This should give you an overview of my personal opinion and the expected power for each of these decks, but in the hands of a skilled player, any of them can succeed. Predicting the metagame correctly for the World Championships will be difficult, but I'd be surprised if any deck had a higher meta share than 15% in total, meaning there will be less room to play hard counters and you will need to rely on a powerful, consistent deck that can adapt to many different situations and is solid all around. I hope this video has been useful for you, and whether you're heading to Worlds or not, I'd love to know how you think Shrouded Fable will affect the metagame and which cards will shine. Thanks for watching, and until next time.
If you want to support the channel, you can use code tablemon to get 5% off at Potent Store for your online codes, 10% off for your sealed product at Flipside Gaming, and 10% off on your aluminum accessories at TC Evolutions. Or if you're looking to buy singles or sleeves, you can fill up your cart and close the tab, then click on the affiliate link in the description and check out. That way you can support the channel over at TCG Player, Card Market, and Dragon Shield. ¿Eres de México y necesitas cartas de Pokémon? Busca Hyperbeam Cards en Facebook e Instagram. Y si estás en Tijuana, búscalos en el local C27 en el Centro Comercial Otay.